Chapter 1. For 10 years, Clara Ford had stood by the cold-hearted president, but Ethan Vance still didn't love her. Clara had always believed he couldn't get over the shadow of his first love, the one who had died for him. That was until she was on the brink of death during surgery, and he flew abroad to be with his new mistress, who had merely scraped her ankle. In just 1 month, he did 999 little things for that woman. A different gourmet meal every day, buying jewelry she glanced at for a second too long, personally setting up a candlelight dinner. These were all things Clara had painstakingly taught him, but he had never done any of them for her. When Ethan returned, the satisfied smile on his face was a sharp sting to Clara's eyes. She didn't greet him at the door as she usually did. She didn't even say hello. She just stared down at the single, withered flower on the table. She had bought it specifically before her hospitalization, hoping Ethan would give it to her after the surgery. But she had spent a lonely month in the hospital. The flower never came. He never came to take her home. Instead, she saw photos online of him abroad, presenting Jessica Miller with a sea of roses worth millions of dollars. Ethan handed a gift box to Clara. "The methods you taught me for winning a woman over worked quite well. This is a thank you gift." A heavy blow struck her heart, and Clara found it hard to breathe. It was the first gift Ethan had ever given her in 12 years, and for such an absurd reason. Worse, the box contained a complimentary item given to clients who spend over $10 million at a luxury brand. He probably felt it wasn't good enough for Jessica Miller, so he brought it back for her as an afterthought. Clara didn't take the box. Ethan frowned. It was just a minimally invasive procedure. "Wasn't having the doctor call me over 100 times enough? Are you still going to hold a grudge? Clara, when did you become so overly dramatic?" Overly dramatic? Clara's face turned deathly pale. A year ago, she had taken a bullet for Ethan. The shrapnel had lodged in her heart. She fought for her life for a day and a night, surviving with lingering complications. What was supposed to be a simple, minimally invasive surgery, to fix it had gone horribly wrong. Her conditions suddenly worsened, requiring open-heart surgery. She hemorrhaged and went into cardiac arrest. The doctor issued a critical condition notice, but Ethan, who was supposed to be by her side, had left and his phone was off. In the end, it was the Vance family butler who rushed over to sign the consent forms. She had spent a full month recovering before she could be discharged, only for him to dismiss her life and death struggle as being overly dramatic. The words of explanation caught in her throat. For the first time, Clara felt a deep, bone-weary exhaustion, but Ethan couldn't stand her silence. His voice dropped. "Clara, Jessica is a professional dancer. Her ankles cannot be injured. Moreover, she is the future lady of this house, and she will be your employer. Logically and emotionally, you shouldn't keep dwelling on this. I'm planning a solo dance showcase for her here in the city. You will make the arrangements." The piercing words echoed in her mind. Clara dug her nails into her palms, but in the end, she answered obediently, "Of course, Mr. Vance." Ethan's brow smoothed as he walked toward the door. "Good. First, come with me to the family estate for dinner. Mother wants to see you." Clara struggled to her feet and slowly followed him. It dawned on her then that in 12 years, Ethan Vance had never once waited for her. Clara had been bought by the Vance family. At 10, she was abducted, lost her memory due to illness, and 3 years later, she became an item at an auction. Huddled in a cage, she listened to the vile comments and the steadily rising bids, her head bowed in despair. Just then, a cool, young voice cut through the noise. He had bid with a single, decisive gesture that meant he would pay a price higher than anyone else's, with no upper limit. Clara looked up in astonishment. The boy sat composed in the VIP section, his delicate features showing neither joy nor sorrow. To her, he was a savior, a god. Only later did she learn that Ethan Vance had bought her simply because she resembled his one that got away. That girl had saved him from a kidnapping, but was grievously injured and fell into the sea. Her body was never found. From that day on, Ethan sealed off his heart, losing most of his ability to feel. He refused all arranged marriages, and his business tactics grew increasingly ruthless, drawing criticism. The Vance family tried everything to no avail, until he bought Clara. It was the first time in 3 years he had shown any emotional response. From that day forward, Clara became Ethan's shadow. She managed his daily life, accompanied him to close numerous deals, and even coached him on how to date and interact with women. Eventually, even the stern patriarch of the family, Arthur Vance, was moved by her devotion and granted her one of the shares in Vance Corp. Only Ethan remained cold. He said that up close, her eyes were nothing like his first love's, so he never showed her a moment of warmth. Clara endured year after year, fueled by gratitude and love. Even when she was dying, her thoughts were of Ethan. But in the end, all she got was watching him lavish infinite affection on Jessica Miller, a woman who looked even more like the girl he'd lost. She had worked for 12 years, only to set the stage for another woman's happiness. In that case, she didn't want him anymore either. Chapter 2. The car stopped. Ethan got out first and walked into the family estate. When Clara entered, he was on the phone. "Your ankle hasn't healed. Why are you practicing again?" He was chiding the person on the other end, but his tone was filled with concern. The woman's voice was sweet and coquettish. "Ethan, you took care of me for a month. I wanted to prepare a special dance just for you." Then, she let out a cry of pain, and Ethan immediately grew tense. "I'll be right there." He turned abruptly, accidentally knocking Clara over. Her back slammed hard against the doorframe, a dull ache spreading to her heart. She couldn't move for a moment, but Ethan didn't even glance back. He got in his car and sped away from the estate. A self-mocking smile touched Clara's lips. She painfully got to her feet and went to find a leaner Vance kneeling directly before her. "Mrs. Vance, the contract I signed with the family stated I would stay with Mr. Vance until he married. Now that he has found his true love, it's time for me to leave." Eleanor was reluctant. "You've been with Ethan for so many years. Are you sure you don't want to hold on a little longer?" Clara shook her head. "He will never love me. Besides, I've found my family." 2 years ago, on a business trip, Clara had met a young man who bore a striking resemblance to her. A DNA test confirmed they were brother and sister. But for Ethan's sake, Clara had chosen to stay. Now, she no longer wanted to. Eleanor sighed. "It seems you and Ethan were not meant to be. However, please wait 1 more month. Leave after the old master's birthday banquet." Clara still had some loose ends to tie up, so she agreed. She signed the contract termination agreement and collected her personal belongings from the estate. Just as she was about to leave, she received a call from Ethan. "Bring the ankle medication you left at the estate and come over." Clara drove to the dance studio at the address Ethan sent. As she entered, she heard a woman's bright laughter, followed by a man's restrained grunt. Then his helpless, husky voice, "Stop messing around." Clara's steps faltered. 3 years ago, after Eleanor had hinted at wanting her as a daughter-in-law, she had tried everything to seduce Ethan. Kissing him when he was drunk, wearing a daring blouse with nothing underneath during a video conference, sitting on his desk wearing only his shirt the last time, she had boldly slipped into his bed. He had thrown her out, wrapped in the bedsheet like a piece of trash. He had looked at her with disgust. "Don't cheapen yourself while wearing her face." After that, Clara never dared to try again. She couldn't believe that in just 1 month, he had developed such desire for Jessica Miller. She took a few deep breaths, knocked, and walked in. The sight that greeted her was Ethan, on one knee, his expression incredibly serious as he held the woman's ankle, massaging it for her. An old injury on Clara's own foot throbbed with a phantom pain. In her first year as Ethan's assistant, the Vance family was in the critical process of choosing an heir. To help him, Clara took on a notoriously difficult client. For an entire month, she ran herself ragged catering to the client's every unreasonable demand. On the final errand, she fell down a hill and broke her foot. But Ethan had never shown a shred of concern. When she mustered the courage to seek his sympathy, all he said was, "In the future, if you can't handle something, don't make trouble for others." Lost in thought, she was jolted back to the present by Ethan's voice. "Clara, you know how to do this. You apply the ointment for Jessica." Clara looked at him, stunned. Chapter 3. Jessica pulled at Ethan's arm. "It's all right, Ethan. If Miss Ford doesn't want to, I can do it myself." She reached for the ointment box, but the movement aggravated her injury, and she winced in pain. Ethan quickly pulled her into his arms to comfort her. His gaze toward Clara was cold and filled with disgust. "Don't make me say it again." His stare made Clara's heart skip a beat. In the end, she gave in. She didn't want to cause any trouble before she left. She warmed the cold ointment in her palm before applying it to Jessica's ankle. The sound of their cheerful chatter filled the air, slowly tearing apart the love in Clara's heart. Suddenly, Jessica kicked out, striking Clara squarely in the chest. She fell backward, her vision turning black for a moment. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Miss Ford, you were pressing too hard, and the pain was unbearable." Jessica's tone was apologetic, but her eyes shone with undisguised triumph. And of course, Ethan believed her. "Clara, stop playing games in front of me." A cold sweat broke out on Clara's forehead from the pain. She bit her lip and eased the pressure of her massage. As soon as she was finished, she fled. In the middle of the night, a notification sound woke Clara. It was a friend request from Jessica, who needed to send her the design requirements for the solo dance showcase. But after accepting, Jessica sent a photo instead. An image of hickeys on a woman's neck and a man's back covered in scratch marks flashed on the screen before it was retracted a second later. Clara sat awake all night, the last embers of her love for Ethan Vance extinguished completely. For the next week, she threw herself into the dance showcase project, leading her team to create hundreds of proposals. She barely slept more than 4 hours a night, but Jessica always found something to complain about. It wasn't until the day before the show that she reluctantly chose the very first design they had proposed. On the day of the performance, Jessica arrived late for rehearsal. "I'm so sorry, Miss Ford. I was so tired last night I ended up sleeping all day." Jessica glanced shyly at Ethan, who had brought her. He chuckled, gently stroking her earlobe. "I'll come pick you up after the rehearsal." Once Ethan was gone, Jessica's expression shifted to a triumphant, mocking smirk. "Clara, don't pretend you didn't see those pictures. What's the use of clinging to the Vance family with that face? For 12 whole years, he couldn't even stand the sight of you. But I just had to beckon, and he took me to bed again and again." To her surprise, Clara's expression remained calm. She walked past Jessica. "We have limited time. Let's start the rehearsal." Jessica felt as if her punch had landed on a pillow, her face soured. As they passed each other, she suddenly reached out and shoved Clara hard. A loud thud was followed by Jessica's scream. Clara tumbled down the stairs in a violent collision. She managed to stop her fall on the next landing by grabbing onto the leg of a table. Her head was bleeding, and her body ached as if it had been run over by a truck. Her previously injured foot sent searing pain through her, with even the slightest touch to the ground. Jessica walked down, kicking her with a look of disgust. Then, hearing Ethan's hurried footsteps returning, she collapsed to the floor. Her expression was pitiful. "Ethan, my foot hurts so much." Ethan rushed up the stairs, pulling Jessica into his arms with concern, carefully examining her injury. He completely ignored Clara, who was far more seriously hurt. Jessica explained through choked tears, "Ethan, please don't blame Miss Ford. She just lost her footing. I'm sure she didn't mean to push me." Ethan's face was livid as he looked at Clara, but when he saw the blood covering her head, he froze. "You," before he could finish, Jessica gasped in pain. Chapter 4. Jessica whimpered, "Ethan, does this mean I can't perform later? The doctor said my foot can't take another injury. It needs to be properly rested." "I'm so sorry. You hired the best dance instructor for me, but now I won't be able to become her student." The flicker of concern for Clara in Ethan's eyes vanished. He kissed Jessica's lips to soothe her, his gaze on Clara turning even colder. "I didn't push her." Clara clung to the railing, struggling to her feet, her eyes shattered and uncertain. The moment she spoke, Jessica flinched fearfully, pressing herself deeper into Ethan's arms. When he looked at her with worry, she forced a weak smile. Ethan's anger erupted. "Clara, I saw Jessica fall with my own eyes. She's a sweet girl. Do you think she would lie?" He ignored the plea in Clara's eyes and called for the bodyguards. "Make her kneel on the stairs, starting from the bottom. For every step she kneels, she says, 'I'm sorry.'" She will continue until Jessica is willing to forgive her. 2 bodyguards dragged Clara to the bottom of the grand staircase and forced her onto her knees. A sickening crack echoed as her knees hit the marble. All color drained from Clara's face. She knew that if she didn't kneel willingly, they would drag her up the entire way. She stopped struggling and began to ascend, 1 step at a time. At the top, Ethan sat with Jessica in his arms, his eyes devoid of any emotion. From the bottom to the top, there were 5 landings and 99 steps. As she reached the first landing, she heard Jessica's triumphant, delicate laughter from above. Clara's legs ached, and her heart felt numb with bitterness. At the second landing, a sharp, piercing pain shot through her ankle. Her heart sank further. She knew then that her ankle was ruined for good. By the fifth landing, Clara was physically and emotionally numb, moving mechanically upward. When she finally knelt before Ethan, her body was trembling. Blood from the wound on her forehead streamed down, blurring her vision. After uttering her final "I'm sorry," she coughed up a mouthful of blood. Just before she lost consciousness, she saw a look of panic on Ethan's face. She woke up 3 days later in a hospital room. A nurse was checking her post-operative condition. "You're awake. You had surgery for a ruptured Achilles tendon. You must avoid any strenuous running or jumping from now on, or you'll end up with a permanent limp. Also, after your heart surgery, you overworked yourself and then engaged in severe physical activity. You'll need to be very careful with your recovery." After the nurse left, Clara opened her phone. The news of last night's solo dance showcase was everywhere. Jessica's dancing skills weren't particularly strong, but the showcase still became a trending topic. It was because the president of Vance Corp, Ethan Vance, had presented her with flowers on stage and officially announced their engagement. When questioned by reporters, he clarified that he and Clara were merely adoptive siblings. He stated that he had only ever been in one relationship, and that was with Jessica. Overnight, Clara was thrown into a storm of public opinion. Everyone said Clara Ford was the future Mrs. Vance, but it was all one-sided. What a social climber. I heard she only kept her job at the company because she looks like Jessica Miller. Give me a break. She tried to seduce Ethan Vance many times, but he completely ignored her. Calling her an adoptive sister was just him being polite. I heard she pushed Miss Miller down the stairs. When will people like her just disappear? Clara closed her eyes in humiliation as she saw the tens of thousands of hateful comments flooding her social media account. She called Ethan, her voice trembling. "Did you let these stories spread on purpose?" Chapter 5. Yes. Jessica needed me to make a public statement to feel secure. And what about me? After all these years with you, do I deserve to be publicly humiliated? She tried to hold back her tears, but a sob escaped. It was the first time in 12 years Ethan had ever heard her cry. He was silent for a long moment before finally sighing. "Clara, you've always been strong. A little news like this won't affect you. Jessica is fragile, and her grandmother is gravely ill and wants to see her married soon." Clara raised her voice. "You had a million ways to make her feel secure. Why did you have to sacrifice my reputation?" Ethan had never been questioned by her like this, and his temper flared. "Clara, the reason you could stay by my side was because you knew your place. Don't compare yourself to Jessica. She is more important than anything to me." Clara fell silent, her love suddenly feeling pathetic. Hearing her silence, Ethan's tone softened. "All right, Jessica has forgiven you for pushing her. She personally picked out a set of jewelry for you and had it sent to the house." "Who would want?" Before Clara could finish, Jessica's voice came from Ethan's side and he hung up the phone. She put down her phone, buried her face in her hands, and cried for a long, long time. Only then did she feel a little better. Clara deleted her social media accounts and cleared all the messages on her phone. In the end, only one message remained from her brother. He was abroad and had just heard what happened. He told her not to worry, that he would take care of everything soon. Sure enough, half an hour later, all news of Ethan and Jessica's engagement had vanished from the internet. She sent him a heartfelt thank you, and the knot of anxiety in her chest finally loosened. 20 days left. Soon, she would be free. Clara spent a week recovering in the hospital before being discharged. During that time, Ethan never called. Jessica's social media feed, however, was filled with posts of their romance. "The most handsome man is the one who drops $1 billion deal to come with me to a small town to light lanterns and make wishes today. He took me to the Vance Corp. New product launch. He said I'll be the face of the company from now on. I just complained once about not wanting to audition for dance companies, and he bought one for me. Ethan is so sweet. It's just my period, but he was so worried he couldn't sleep all night." Clara scrolled through the posts one by one. Words that would have once made her jealous and miserable now failed to stir any emotion. When she returned home, the first thing she noticed was a thin layer of dust on the furniture. She learned that because Jessica didn't want to do housework, Ethan had dismissed the entire staff. Then, she saw the jewelry Ethan had mentioned. It was an old-fashioned set, cheap and grimy, looking as if it had been worn by someone for a very long time. Clara immediately called a jewelry reseller. She sold the set, along with all her other valuable luxury goods and clothes. Then she went to have her official records changed. Previously, she had been registered under Ethan's parents. Now that she was leaving, she decided to have her name completely removed from their family records so that Ethan could never find her again. Back home, Clara began to pack her personal belongings. She had many things, but not much she wanted to take. Most of it was related to Ethan. His high school sports jersey, a fountain pen he had casually given her, a button from the shirt over his heart, Clara destroyed them all and threw them away. There were also old photographs. Even a single shot of them in the same frame at a press conference had been carefully laminated by her. But now, she cut out her half and threw the rest away. She spent 2 full days packing. As she tossed the last box into the trash, the part of her heart that belonged to Ethan Vance was finally, completely, carved out. "What did you throw away?" Chapter 6. Ethan's deep voice suddenly came from behind her. Clara spun around, colliding with a broad, strong chest. But after 20 years of longing for this embrace, she recoiled as if burned. Just some useless junk. Ethan's hand, which had reached out to steady her, hung in the air for a moment before dropping to his side. Clara pressed her lips together. "Why are you back so suddenly? Don't you need to be with Miss Miller today? Jessica has been having trouble sleeping. I came to get the amulet from you." Ethan's expression was stern, as if he were conducting a business transaction, not making a request. The jade amulet had been a special gift from Martha Vance. When Clara first arrived at the Vance household, she was often sick and had nightmares. Martha had told her that with the amulet, no one could take her life away. After that, the frail Clara rarely fell ill. She never thought Ethan would ask for it for Jessica, but if she was going to leave, she might as well make a clean break. Clara removed the amulet she had worn for 12 years without fail and placed it in his palm. This time, it was Ethan who was surprised. He stared into her eyes for a long time but saw no trace of resentment. He frowned, ultimately suppressing the strange feeling. Just then, Ethan's phone rang. Jessica's terrified scream came from the other end. "Ethan, help me, I've been kidnapped. The person seems to know Miss Ford. He said if he doesn't see her in half an hour, he's going to throw me into the sea to feed the fish." A burst of sharp static followed. The line to Jessica's phone went dead. Ethan immediately called his assistant, telling him to track Jessica's location. Then, he turned to Clara, his eyes cold and scrutinizing. A jolt of fear went through Clara. She shook her head frantically. "It wasn't me." But Ethan grabbed her arm and dragged her outside. "You'd better hope Jessica is okay, or I won't let you off the hook." He shoved her into the passenger seat. She barely had time to fasten her seatbelt before the car lurched through several sharp turns, leaving her dizzy and nauseous. The car screeched to a halt at the docks. Ethan pulled a pale-faced Clara out of the car. She barely managed to stand, a sharp pain shooting through her ankle. When she looked up, her legs went weak. A wave of terror washed over her, and she clung to Ethan's arm, shaking her head and crying. "No, I can't go in there, Ethan. This is where they auction me off." Ethan froze, his own expression turning grim. He was the one who had bought her and brought her home. She had been tortured into a skeletal wreck. From then on, auction and yacht became forbidden words, triggers she could not bear. But just as Ethan hesitated, a woman's scream pierced the air from a distance. He looked up and saw Jessica, bound and dangling from a crane over the water. Beneath her was the deep, dark sea. In the water, he could make out the shapes of sharks circling. Ethan's eyes turned bloodshot with rage. A familiar figure emerged from the yacht. It was his arch-nemesis, Walter King, a man he had schemed to bankrupt. Ethan scowled. "I've brought the person you wanted. What is it you're after?" Mr. King clapped his hands, and a small boat pulled up in front of Ethan and Clara. "One is the rumored love of Mr. Vance's life, his beloved fiancée. The other is the right-hand woman who has been by his side for 12 years. His eyes glinted with amusement. "Choose one woman as your stake, and we'll play a game. If you win, I'll let you all go. If you lose, your stake is mine." Clara trembled. "Ethan, I was the one who executed the plan against him publicly. He'll kill me. Your men have already called the police. If we can just stall for a little while." Jessica's loud sobs drowned out her voice. "Ethan, don't come up here. It doesn't matter if I die, but you have to be safe." The next second, a thick club struck her left leg, and she screamed in agony. Veins bulged on Ethan's forehead. He roared, "I choose Clara Ford as the stake." Chapter 7. The moment Ethan spoke, the men on the yacht lowered Jessica. At the same time, the last bit of fight left Clara's body. Her expression was hollow and desolate as she stared at Ethan. "Ethan Vance, you took me away from this place only to bring me back." She laughed bitterly. "Does this mean my debt to you is finally paid?" For the first time in a long while, Ethan looked directly into her eyes, and a sharp, twisting pain shot through his heart. In that moment, Clara's eyes merged with the image of the person from the depths of his memory. But Jessica's crying brought him back to his senses. He tried to reassure Clara. "Trust me, I won't let anything happen to you. Mr. King's grudge is with you and me. Jessica is innocent. She can't be dragged into this." With that, he pulled the unresisting Clara onto the small boat and boarded the yacht. As soon as they were on board, Mr. King's men brought over Jessica, who was sobbing uncontrollably. Ethan's voice was icy. "I've brought her. Now give Jessica back to me." Mr. King waved his hand, and his men pushed Jessica toward Ethan. Then they tied Clara up and put her in a cage. Terrifying memories flooded back, and Clara struggled to breathe. She looked at Ethan, her eyes pleading. But he was completely focused on checking Jessica's injuries, not looking at her at all. The light in Clara's eyes dimmed as she watched them hoist her over the side of the yacht, dangling above the sea. "What are you doing?" Ethan demanded, enraged. "We'll guess the roll of the dice 5 times, high or low. Each time you lose, the rope goes down." As Mr. King spoke, the cage dropped a few feet, and Clara's face went white. Ethan had no choice but to agree, deliberately stalling for time, waiting for help to arrive. He finally relaxed when he heard the sound of a signal flare. But then, a series of explosions rocked the yacht. By the time Ethan regained his composure, Mr. King had escaped under the cover of his men. Jessica clung to his arm, pleading, "Ethan, we have to go. The yacht is going to sink." But Ethan pushed her away and rushed to free Clara. A few more explosions sent all 3 of them flying, landing hard on the deck. Clara heard a distinct cracking sound and cried out in pain, clutching her injured ankle. Just as Ethan was about to check on her, Jessica started crying. "Ethan, my foot hurts so much." He withdrew his hand and pulled Jessica into his arms. He looked at Clara with concern. But this time, all he saw were her tightly shut, tear-filled eyes and a body racked with despair. Ethan was struck by the realization that he hadn't seen Clara smile in a very long time. The optimistic, vibrant girl he once knew had vanished. His heart clenched. He wanted to call out to her, but another explosion cut him off. This time, the yacht split in 2 and water rushed onto the deck. Fortunately, the sound of a rescue team came from below. But because of the explosions, only one small boat could get close, and it could hold at most 2 people. As the yacht sank rapidly, Ethan had to make a choice. He gritted his teeth. "I'm sorry, Clara. I'll find a way to save you." With that, he picked up Jessica and jumped into the boat. Clara's lips trembled into a hopeless smile. No, she wouldn't wait for him ever again. Grabbing a life preserver from the stern, she leaped into the sea amidst the thunderous explosions. The massive impact plunged her into the deep. Her life flashed before her eyes like a movie. Her last conscious thought was of Ethan, his face alight with joyous relief as he held Jessica, kissing her tenderly. "This time," he whispered, "I finally saved you." When Clara regained consciousness, she was in an emergency room. She could hear people arguing outside. A doctor's anxious voice. "Mr. Vance, Miss Ford has a heart condition, severe burns on her back, and her old leg injury has flared up. She could be permanently disabled. We should treat her first." Ethan hesitated for only a moment before Jessica's cries made his decision. Save Jessica, a tragic smile touched Clara's lips, and she fainted completely. Chapter 8. When Clara was next woken by pain, she was in a hospital ward. The moment she moved, a hand gripped hers. "Don't move. Your back is injured, and you just had surgery to repair your ankle." Ethan's voice was gentle, his eyes filled with deep concern. "Does it hurt anywhere? I'll get the doctor." This was the tenderness Clara had dreamed of for years. But now her heart was a frozen wasteland. She pushed his hand away. "You shouldn't be here. You should be with Miss Miller." A flicker of guilt crossed Ethan's eyes. He was about to speak when his phone rang. Jessica's panicked voice came through. "Ethan, where are you? I had another nightmare about my leg being broken. I'm so scared." Ethan quickly soothed her in a soft voice. He looked apologetically at Clara. "Jessica has been having nightmares since the incident. She can't be left alone. I'll come back to see you when she's better." After Ethan hurried away, a scornful smile appeared on Clara's face. Her memories had returned. She was Ethan's one that got away. The trauma of falling into the sea had caused amnesia, and the kidnappers had sold her on the black market. That was how she had lost contact with her family and ended up becoming her own replacement. The irony was that Ethan had never recognized her. And for a substitute, he had tormented her until she was broken. Her phone buzzed. A notification confirmed that her name had been officially removed from the Vance family records. Her brother also messaged with the good news that the flight plan for his private jet had been approved. Clara finally breathed a sigh of relief. 1 week left. Soon, she would be gone. Clara spent the next week in the hospital recovering. Ethan never visited. Jessica, however, sent her a photo. It was of the shattered pieces of the jade amulet in a trash can. On a table nearby sat a brand new amulet. "Thank you for your amulet, Miss Ford. It protected me from disaster." But Ethan said a broken one can't be worn anymore, so he knelt up 999 steps to pray for a new one for me. "He's so silly. I just have a little bruise on my leg, but he won't let me walk and carries me everywhere." Clara didn't want to see any more. She blocked Jessica. The day before the banquet, Clara was discharged. At home, she packed her remaining luggage and sent it to the address her brother had provided. She would leave directly from the banquet tomorrow afternoon. Just as the luggage was taken away, Ethan returned. "I went to pick you up, but you were already gone." He looked puzzled. "What did you just have sent out?" Clara changed the subject. "Did you need something from me?" Ethan was silent for a moment before finally speaking. "Give the credit for organizing the banquet to Jessica." Clara froze, then let out a laugh of pure disbelief. "Do you have any idea what you're saying? It was a Vance family tradition for the younger generation to take turns organizing the patriarch's birthday. It was a great honor, a way for them to showcase their abilities and build connections. As the Vance's adopted daughter, Clara had learned from Alina since she was young. The 2 banquets she had organized in the past had received universal praise. Because of this, she had become the family's intended choice for Ethan's fiancé. But because Ethan never agreed, the matter was never brought up again. This year was Arthur Vance's 80th birthday. She had started preparations a year in advance, running around to finalize every detail. Even during her hospitalization, she had continued to oversee the project. And now, he wanted her to hand over all her hard work to Jessica Miller. Ethan explained softly, "The elders are not entirely happy about my engagement to Jessica. She comes from a humble background and lacks confidence. I don't want her to lose face at such a major event. Clara, give her this opportunity. You can have anything else you want." Clara pressed. "And what if something goes wrong?" "I'll take responsibility for anything that happens," Ethan answered firmly. Clara said nothing more. She stared at him for a long, long time. The face she had loved for 12 years suddenly seemed foreign and repulsive. Just as Ethan's brow furrowed with impatience, she finally nodded. "Fine, I agree, but I have one condition." Ethan's lips curved. "All right, name it." Chapter 9. After the banquet, admit to the media that Jessica Miller was also just a substitute, and that I was once your fiancé. Ethan frowned, about to refuse, but under Clara's steady gaze, he relented. "Fine, I promise." Clara finally broke into a brilliant smile, but it vanished in an instant. It was so fleeting that Ethan almost missed it. Her face once again merged with the memory of that other person, and for a moment, he was dazed. He was pulled back to reality by a call from Jessica, her voice sweet and coquettish, and he left. That night, Clara compiled all the evidence of Jessica's provocations and abuse, along with proof that she herself was Ethan's long-lost love. She sent it all to a reporter. Since Jessica kept pushing her, she couldn't be blamed for fighting back. The next day, at the family estate, as the banquet was about to begin, Clara's gown was missing. The dress had been custom-made for her by Alina. The fabric alone was worth a fortune. The intricate embroidery and pearl embellishments were priceless. The maid stammered, afraid to speak. Clara seemed to understand. She changed into a backup dress and headed to the banquet hall. Sure enough, she saw Jessica wearing her gown. Jessica was basking in the compliments, her laughter bright and unrestrained. Miss Miller is truly worthy of being the future Mrs. Vance. This banquet is so meticulously planned. I heard Miss Miller was still overseeing the final preparations even while recovering in the hospital. And it seems it was Clara Ford who offended someone and got Miss Miller hurt in the process. Clara Ford really is an imposter who can't be seen in public. She'll be kicked out sooner or later. But Clara felt no sense of loss or humiliation. She continued toward Aliner's private suite. A flash of malice crossed Jessica's eyes. She stepped forward. "I'm so sorry, Miss Ford. I didn't have a suitable gown, so Ethan gave yours to me. But it seems this dress suits me better, doesn't it? After all, I'm the real Mrs. Vance." She swept her hair back, revealing a $10 million engagement ring on her middle finger. But Clara wasn't angry. Instead, she let out a soft, mocking laugh. "You're just an imposter yourself. He needed a substitute, and after the first, there will be a second and then a third. How long do you think you'll last?" Jessica's face twisted with rage. She raised her hand to slap Clara, but Clara caught her wrist. "Are you sure you want to do this here?" Jessica regained her composure, glanced at the surrounding guests, and fearfully withdrew her hand. She shot Clara a venomous glare. "Just you wait." Watching her hurry away, Clara knocked on the door of the suite. Seeing Aliner's sad expression, she felt a pang of reluctance. Aliner sighed. "I raised you for 12 years. You're no different from my own daughter." She handed Clara a folder. "Inside are the documents dissolving the adoption, your letter of termination, and the deed to a house and $10 million. Clara was about to refuse, but Aliner shook her head. "You've been by Ethan's side for so many years. You deserve this." Clara accepted it, giving Aliner a hug before leaving. After leaving the suite, Clara, worried that the banquet might go wrong, gave her detailed design plan to the butler. Just as she turned, an angry Ethan grabbed her by the wrist. "Clara, your gown was designed to match mine. It's completely inappropriate for you to wear today. I decided to give it to Jessica. Why did you have to call her petty and a thief? It's just a dress. What is it that you can't have? Why must you always compete with her?" His grip was so strong that bruises quickly formed on her wrist. She didn't struggle, simply looking at him with cold eyes. "What do I have left? The position of Mrs. Vance, the amulet, my reputation. Haven't you taken everything from me for her sake?" Ethan was speechless. Just then, his assistant called him over. He gave Clara one last deep look. "Jessica is my wife. Don't target her again, or I won't care about our past." With that, he turned and left. Clara's smile was laced with irony. "You won't get another chance to hurt me." She took a car to the airport. As the plane took off, she snapped her SIM card in half. "Ethan Vance, we will never meet again. I hope you like the gift I left for you." Chapter 10. As the banquet was about to begin, an assistant called Ethan Vance away for the final arrangements. But Ethan instructed him, "Tell Clara Ford to stay in the suite after the banquet starts. She is not to come out. I don't want anyone comparing Jessica to her." The assistant hesitated. "But Mr. Vance, Miss Ford is, after all, the family's adopted daughter and your assistant. It's one thing not to have her on stage, but for her not to appear at all, wouldn't that be inappropriate?" Ethan had made the decision in a fit of pique with Clara. At the assistant's words, he calmed down. After a moment's thought, he changed his mind. "Fine, keep her off the stage, but arrange a quiet seat for her in the audience. She prefers quiet." With the arrangements made, Ethan straightened his tie and walked onto the stage with Jessica Miller. Despite his experience, he felt a flicker of nervousness. Today was his grandfather's 80th birthday, the first time he would preside over the ceremony as the heir. It was also the day his grandfather would truly relinquish control, deciding who would be the future head of the Vance family. This was a momentous occasion for Ethan. He cleared his throat and, out of habit, called out Clara's name, glancing to his side. But he was met with a pair of eyes that were excited, triumphant, and slightly lost. Only then did he remember that the person beside him had changed. Jessica was trembling slightly, curiously looking around. Ethan frowned, unable to suppress a feeling of unease. He nudged Jessica's hand, signaling for her to compose herself. But she couldn't understand his subtle cues, and finally, Ethan had to whisper to her, Jessica, you are to be the lady of Vance Corp. You need to be poised and calm. Don't let the guests see you as a joke." At his words, Jessica's movements became stiff. When she looked out at the audience, even her smile seemed forced and unnatural. A wave of disappointment washed over Ethan. Clara would never have been like this. She understood his thoughts perfectly. After years of working together, their rapport was seamless. Often, a simple expression from him was all she needed to convey his intentions flawlessly. And she possessed a natural elegance. Her etiquette was impeccable without ever needing to be taught. The thought startled Ethan. Why was he suddenly thinking of Clara? Why was he comparing Jessica to her? This was wrong. Ethan tried to push down the strange feeling. But as the night went on, his disappointment and discomfort only grew. After the banquet began, praise for Jessica flowed from the audience. On stage, his usually critical family members were also full of compliments for the event. Even those who had previously looked down on Jessica for her background were now looking at her with new respect. But Jessica seemed overwhelmed, nervously clutching her dress and wrinkling the fine fabric. Her smile widened, and she grew increasingly carried away. She even forgot crucial parts of the ceremony, like serving tea to his grandfather and introducing the Vance family members, needing Ethan to remind her. She finally laughed awkwardly. "I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. Ethan, what's the next part again?" In that moment, Ethan, who valued his image above all, felt a profound sense of regret about his engagement to Jessica for the first time. But he still reminded her with a doting tone. "You designed the banquet yourself. Have you already forgotten that it's time to introduce the guests?" "Oh, right, well then, let's welcome our distinguished guests." Listening to her stammer and her voice crack, Ethan clenched his fists, his composure beginning to crumble. He thought the ordeal would end there, but a series of problems followed. Last-minute guests were seated incorrectly, disrupting the order of seniority and importance. When introducing guests, she mixed up two competing companies in the same industry. Worse, her fumbling threw off the entire pace of the event. This led to a complete collapse of the lighting and music cues. Amidst the chaotic flashing lights, Jessica panicked completely, grabbing Ethan's arm at a loss. "Ethan, what is all this?" "You have to help me," Ethan demanded. "Why didn't you go over the rundown properly?" Jessica's temper flared too. "How was I supposed to know? You said I just had to take the credit." "Shut up," Ethan hissed. The coldness in his eyes made Jessica shiver. She had forgotten that the man before her was a lion who devoured his prey without a second thought. That was a close call. She had almost said the wrong thing. Not wanting to look at her cowering face any longer, Ethan shook off her hand and headed toward the control booth. But he saw the butler beat him to it. Chapter 11. With a single click, the butler activated a new program, averting disaster. Simultaneously, he deployed Vance Corp's latest smart robots. Each robot held a red envelope, which it distributed to the guests. The largest robot even went on stage to serve a cup of tea to Arthur Vance. The move successfully diffused the chaotic situation and earned universal praise. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. He sent Jessica off the stage and completed the rest of the ceremony with the butler. By the end, his grandfather did not reprimand him. Ethan's rattled nerves finally calmed. He found the butler. "You did an excellent job just now. Thanks to you, we avoided a major catastrophe." The butler shook his head. It was Miss Ford's design plan. For every important event, she always prepares multiple contingency plans. A small hammer seemed to tap at Ethan's heart, leaving a sour feeling. He had taken Clara's achievement from her, yet in the end, she was the one who had saved him again. Ethan left with the thick binder of design plans. He shouldn't have placed his hopes on finding someone identical to the girl who had saved him. Perhaps he should have a proper talk with Clara. If she was willing to put in the effort to imitate his first love, he would give her a chance. But right now, the person he needed to deal with was Jessica. She had disappeared right after the banquet ended. Ethan frowned, searching for any sign of her. He found her on the rooftop, a cigarette held expertly between her fingers, one leg crossed over the other, a thuggish look on her face. "How much longer do I have to keep up this act? It's been killing me. But Ethan Vance is such a fool. All I have to do is cry a little with this face, and he gives me everything. And my framing of her was so clumsy, but he didn't suspect a thing. I worried for nothing. Once I get his money, you can stage a disaster at sea for me." Let him lose his first love all over again. The sight of him breaking down will be hilarious. Jessica burst out laughing, flicking cigarette ash carelessly onto the ground and her dress. The priceless embroidered gown was instantly burned with several holes. Ethan couldn't listen anymore. He kicked open the door to the rooftop. As Jessica stared in horror, he grabbed her by the throat. "How dare you deceive me?" Ethan lifted her off the ground, and Jessica gasped for air. Her sharp nails clawed at the back of his hand, drawing blood, but he seemed not to notice. Only when she was about to pass out did Ethan hurl her to the ground, wiping his hand with a handkerchief in disgust. He beckoned and bodyguards rushed in, pinning Jessica to the floor. Feeling the sharp pain in her limbs, Jessica was truly terrified this time. She tried to force a gentle smile. "Ethan, you must have misheard. It was just a scam call." She let out a piercing scream. A bodyguard had taken her half-smoked cigarette and pressed it into her shoulder. Ethan waved his hand. "Take her for plastic surgery. No one is allowed to do evil with her face." The bodyguards gagged Jessica and dragged her away. Ethan then called his assistant. "Where is Clara? I need to see her now." The assistant sounded troubled. "Mr. Vance, when you asked me to find her before the banquet, I couldn't. The staff at the estate said she had left long ago." Ethan frowned and dialed Clara's number, only to get a number-disconnected message. How could it be disconnected? His brow furrowed tightly. There should be a limit to her anger. This was going too far. He strode out of the estate, ignoring even his mother's attempts to stop him, and drove toward his villa. At the same time, he messaged his assistant, telling him to pinpoint Clara's location. Ethan was deeply agitated. It felt as if a sparrow he had raised from birth had suddenly developed the ambition to peck its owner. He would not allow the obedient Clara to pick up such a bad habit. On the way, his assistant called repeatedly. Ethan had to answer. "You'd better have something urgent to tell me." "It's terrible, Mr. Vance, it's a huge crisis. Everything you did to Miss Ford is all over the news." The assistant's voice was panicked. Ethan's expression was icy. "What's there to be afraid of? Take down the news, find out who posted it, and send them a cease and desist letter." He was about to hang up when the assistant's voice grew even more frantic. "But Miss Ford posted it herself." "And she," the assistant sucked in a sharp breath. "She's your one that got away." Screech Ethan's car slammed into a tree, the front end completely destroyed. He slumped over, bleeding from his head, and lost consciousness. Chapter 12. Meanwhile, Clara Ford was on a plane, feeling deeply uneasy. The decision to go home had been an impulsive one. At the time, she had been desperate to get away from Ethan Vance. When her brother happened to send a message checking in on her, she blurted out that she wanted to come home. As Ethan, blind and heartless, continued to torment her for the sake of a substitute, her desire to return home grew stronger. This homesickness peaked after she regained her memories. The night before she left, after compiling the evidence, she was so happy she couldn't sleep. But now, on the plane, a cold dose of reality washed over her. Beyond their blood ties, they were strangers. What if her family didn't like her after she showed up so suddenly? The longer the flight, the more these thoughts ballooned in her mind. She was so lost in them that she barely heard what her brother, Leo Ford, was saying to her. Then a warmth spread through her palm. She looked down, startled, to see a cup of homemade milk tea. Leo sat down across from her, holding a cup of freshly brewed black tea. "Taro bubble tea, extra taro paste, 1/3 sugar, warm, no boba." He smiled gently. "I remember, that's what you ordered the first time we met again, right?" The handsome young man adjusted his glasses, the light in his eyes as warm as the sun. He and Clara shared a strong resemblance. His features were just more defined, and being 6 years older, he looked more mature. Clara was surprised he remembered her preference, and her eyes lit up. What he said next surprised her even more. "I know you're still recovering from your time in the hospital. I made this myself. It's healthy, not too much tea, so don't worry." His familiar tone reminded Clara of how, before she was lost, Leo, who had practically raised her, would often coax her just like this. It was as if the 12 years of separation had left no mark on them. Miraculously, Clara suddenly felt herself relax. She said a soft, "Thank you," and began to sip the milk tea. Leo watched her with a constant smile, as if gazing at a priceless treasure. A treasure that had been stolen and was now, thankfully, returned. Only when Clara had completely relaxed did he speak again. "Sis, have your memories returned?" Clara nodded. "Yes, I remember everything. My name is Clara Ford, and my family loves me very much." On the day she was taken, her captors had drugged her. Later, the trauma of the kidnapping and falling into the sea caused her amnesia. That was why she only knew her last name was Ford, and that her home was in the southernmost part of the country. Beyond that, she knew nothing. The name, Clara, had been given to her by Martha Vance. Because Ethan had brought her back on a clear night, under a bright moon. Martha hoped her future would be as bright as the morning sun, and that she would be as beautiful as fine jade. So she had given her such a lovely name. Her original name, however, was because she was born at the brightest moment of the full moon. Her family had used a simple name to convey their deepest wish for her to grow up healthy. Clara often thought that she was unlucky, for her deep love for Ethan had brought her endless suffering. But she was also lucky. Besides him, the Ford family, the Vance elders, and Alina Vance all loved her dearly. Clara recounted the story of her name, and Leo's smile softened his features even more. "Let me tell you what happened at home after you were gone." Chapter 13. Clara's disappearance was the result of a family feud. The Fords were a prominent Southern family. Over several hundred years, the family's influence had become deeply entrenched, with diverse business interests and vast accumulated wealth. Clara's branch of the family was originally one of the most obscure. But her grandfather, a retired military man, had wanted to venture into modern businesses, a move that was met with opposition from the family's conservative elders. So her grandfather took his wife and children, started from scratch, and built his own enterprise. His success, however, bred jealousy. Several malicious family members conspired with his rivals and had Clara kidnapped. They covered for each other, deliberately slowing down her grandfather's search for clues. Worse, these relatives were close to the head of the main Ford clan. So when her grandfather uncovered the truth and asked the clan leader to deal with them, he was refused. The clan even tried to stop Clara's family from continuing their search. Enraged, Clara's grandfather broke away from the main family and established his own house. Riding the wave of the times, he built a billion-dollar fortune and crushed the Ford clan that had constantly stood in his way. Now, Clara's branch of the family had transformed from a side branch into the main one. Clara's father had become the head of the Ford family for his generation. At this point, Leo smiled warmly at the serious-looking Clara. "You've come back to be the princess of the Ford family, Clara. No one will ever dare to bully you again." A lump formed in Clara's throat. For some reason, she desperately wanted to cry. The Vances had been good to her over the years. Alina, who had no daughter of her own, had taught her everything she knew without reservation. But for Clara, the feeling of being an outsider, of living under someone else's roof, was an ever-present anxiety. All these years, she hadn't had a single night of peaceful sleep. Her days revolved around catering to Ethan's life and work. He was a demanding person. Clara had filled 7 thick notebooks just with his preferences. He was equally strict at work, demanding perfection in everything she did. Before, Clara had thought that since she loved Ethan, it was only right for her to do these things for him. But looking back now, she realized the real reason was that she knew she had to please him to be allowed to stay with the Vance family. The misattribution of arousal had made her mistake fear for love, a mistake that had cost her 12 years. Now, hearing her brother's words, she understood what true love was. With this realization, the defensiveness and anxiety in Clara's heart melted away. In their place was a profound exhaustion and a sense of grievance. Leo opened his arms to her. "If you're tired, why don't you lean on your brother for a while?" Clara hesitated for a moment, but looking at his reassuring face, she finally surrendered. Leo moved closer, adjusting his shoulder so she could rest comfortably, and continued to tell her about their family. "Everyone was so happy to hear you were coming back, but I told them not to throw a big welcome party. I know you don't like crowds. The elders haven't changed much over the years. I'm the one who's changed the most. I took over the family business after college." He couldn't help but smile. "I got married a few years ago. Your sister-in-law is a wonderful person. We have a pair of twins, a boy and a girl, and they're always clamoring to see their auntie." Leo's voice was like a gentle spring rain, soothing the last traces of unease in Clara's heart. She drifted off to sleep to the sound of his deep, pleasant voice, a relaxed smile on her lips. Chapter 14. When she woke again, the plane was about to land. Clara hadn't slept for long, but she felt unusually refreshed. She stretched sleepily and realized she was lying on a large, warm, and soft bed. Leo must have moved her here after she fell asleep. And Leo himself was sitting at the foot of the bed, his hand gently resting on the scar on her ankle, his eyes filled with pain. This strong man's eyes were brimming with tears, a flicker of anguish in them. Seeing Clara was awake, he turned away, wiped his eyes, and then turned back with a gentle smile. "You're awake. Did you sleep well? We're landing in 15 minutes. You can get more sleep at home. I've already made arrangements. No welcome party today. You can take some time to settle in at home first." Clara nodded. "Thank you, brother. I slept very well, and my injuries are fine. Don't be sad." Her words only made Leo feel worse. He turned his head to discreetly wipe away another tear. He pulled her into a hug, gently patting her back. "I'm already looking for the best scar treatments and physical therapists. Clara, you will recover completely." Clara nodded firmly. "I believe you, brother, because my Leo is capable of anything." Hearing the nickname she used in their childhood games, Leo's back stiffened slightly. Then he let out a hearty, open laugh. Clara wasn't the only one who had been trapped in the past. The plane landed. Supported by Leo, Clara suppressed her excitement and walked down the steps. She looked up and saw that her entire family was there. Her grandparents, her parents, and even her sister-in-law, whom she had never met, all had faces filled with deep affection. A pair of twins, about the same age she was when she was taken, stood with serious expressions on their similar little faces. They held long balloons, waving them in a rhythmic welcome. Looking at them, Clara was moved to tears. 12 years seemed to have changed so much, and yet it felt as if nothing had changed at all. Her grandfather looked stern, a formidable figure in the business world, but he doted on his children and grandchildren. Her grandmother was gentle and kind, her grandfather's best partner in business and a devoted wife at home. Her father had a refined air. As the head of the family, he was more composed and reserved than the artist he had been years ago. Her mother was elegant and gentle. Once a dancer, she had retired to become a painter. Then there was her sister-in-law, Anya. Despite her gentle name, she was a force to be reckoned with, having secured many deals for the Ford family. After giving birth to the twins, she didn't return to the family business but founded her own perfume brand, becoming a well-known powerhouse. Clara hurried over, no longer able to hold back her emotions. She threw her arms around her mother's waist and wept uncontrollably. It was as if she was releasing all the grievances of the past years, trying to soak up all the warmth she had missed in this embrace. When she had cried her fill, she looked up, a little embarrassed. She saw that her family's eyes were all red, and they were turning away to wipe their tears. Anya was the only one not crying. She was comforting the others, handing them tissues. She noticed Clara looking at her and gave her a smile as warm as a spring breeze. Clara couldn't help but smile back. This was good, everything was good. This family, these people, were just as she remembered them. There was no sense of unfamiliarity. In the days that followed, Clara truly lived like a queen. She was waited on hand and foot. If she didn't want to get out of bed, the two little ones would bring her breakfast. At first, Clara felt a bit awkward, until her sister-in-law, Anya, reassured her, "Oh, they've been practicing how to serve you since the day they found out they had an aunt. By calmly accepting it, you're actually fulfilling their wish." So, after that, Clara learned to enjoy the service. Of course, she would bake delicious little cakes for the children as a thank you. The three of them quickly became the best of friends. Chapter 15. As for food, Clara had always thought she had a small appetite, but at her first family dinner back home, she ate until she was stuffed. She was from the South, but the Vance family was based in the North. The cuisines were vastly different, and living under their roof, she never dared to be picky. For years, she had just made do. It was only after she moved out or when she was on business trips that she could eat the food she liked. Now, back home, the dining table was filled with all her favorite dishes. What surprised her even more was a small dessert she had once ordered on a business trip and loved. Seeing how much she liked it, Leo, as if by magic, rolled out a cart full of desserts. They say girls have a separate stomach for dessert. Go on, try them, see if they taste like you remember. Clara took a curious bite. They were all her favorites. Her eyes lit up. Her mother chuckled. Your brother found out you liked them, so he hired the chefs to work for us. From now on, just tell the butler whenever you want some. But Clara's attention was on something else. She looked at Leo. So, after you found me, you've been keeping an eye on me. Leo rubbed his nose, admitting it with a sheepish nod. Clara gave him a big hug. She poured all her gratitude into a single phrase, "You're the best, Leo." According to the employees at Ford Industries, the CEO was walking on air that day. He even approved several imperfect project proposals with a cheerful smile. Furthermore, the Ford family hired a dozen nutritionists for Clara. They created a personalized diet plan based on her health condition. The 3 years of her captivity had completely ruined her health. Ethan Vance's subsequent abuse had only made things worse. So, the family brought in renowned doctors who, in conjunction with the nutritional plan and regular checkups, helped Clara regain her health. In just 1 month, the once skeletal Clara gained several pounds. After years of being constantly busy, she couldn't stand being idle and finally asked to go out. Her mother handed her a black card. During the years she was missing, whenever a family member thought of buying her something, they would deposit money into this card. On her birthdays, on anniversaries, on major holidays, or just whenever they felt happy. Even the twins would deposit a portion of their New Year's money into it. By the time Clara returned, the card held $1 billion. All of it was her pocket money. Her mother waved her hand generously. Go out with your sister-in-law. If you two don't come back with a car full of luxury goods, don't bother coming home. The two sisters-in-law exchanged a look and burst out laughing. Anya even said playfully, "In that case, I won't spend a penny today. I'll rely entirely on my little rich sister-in-law to pay for everything." Clara winked. With pleasure. Over the next few days, Anya took Clara to all the major shopping centers, and their bond grew even closer. The observant Anya noticed that Clara would sometimes stare blankly at the flowers on the roadside, or that when they were in a bookstore, she would gravitate toward books on design. Finally, she couldn't help but ask, "Clara, I remember you studied environmental design in college and later worked as an interior designer, right?" Clara nodded. "Do you love flowers?" Clara nodded again. Anya smiled. "How about opening your own floral design studio? I have a 1,000-acre flower farm. You can draw inspiration from it as much as you like." Clara was thrilled and agreed on the spot. In the days that followed, she threw herself completely into this new venture. As for Ethan Vance, she hadn't thought of him in a long time. Chapter 16. In a dark villa, Ethan Vance sat on the sofa, surrounded by empty liquor bottles. His expression was numb as he poured the high-proof spirit down his throat, one gulp after another. The fiery liquid burned its way down his mouth, his throat, and into his stomach. He felt the intense searing sensation, but showed no reaction. After finishing the last bottle, a sharp pain twisted in his stomach. He curled up in agony, his fist pressed deep into his gut. There was no one left to worry that his drinking would cause stomach pain, no one to make him soothing porridge or a hangover cure. He had once found it burdensome, but now it was a memory he could never touch again. He realized that Clara had seeped into every corner of his life, an indispensable part of him he couldn't let go of. But he had understood too late. His past with Clara replayed in his mind like a movie. He had been the one to buy her, and the light of hope had returned to her eyes, shattering her despair. There were the daily moments he had met with disgust, but she with joy. There was Clara standing by his side, helping him close countless deals, finally watching with admiration as he ascended to the presidency of Vance Corp. And then, there were his own sins, the way he had tormented her until the light in her eyes was extinguished. In the end, Clara's broken gaze, as she boarded the yacht, merged with the look in her eyes as a child, when she had saved him only to be thrown into the sea. A wounded, animal-like cry escaped Ethan's lips, and he finally buried his face in his hands and wept. He had almost killed his first love with his own hands. For the sake of a surgically altered imposter, he had almost killed his first love. He had been so blind that she had been by his side for 12 years, and he had never cherished her. It had been 3 days since the banquet, and he still couldn't escape the tormenting nightmare. When he woke up from the car crash, the world had been turned upside down. His cruel deeds against Clara, along with evidence of how Jessica had framed her, were all public knowledge. The same people who had once called Clara a social climber were now attacking him, condemning him for taking advantage of her act of salvation to nearly kill her. The security footage from the rehearsal that day was especially damning. Jessica's smug, petty expression was nauseating, and Ethan's decision to punish Clara without question drew the public's fury. And that was before the incident on the yacht came to light. Ethan had forced Clara to go to the place she feared most, to face the person she feared most, and sent her to her death. Even if Clara wasn't his savior, even setting aside her years of dedicated work, she should never have been treated that way. Most importantly, netizens had discovered that Arthur Vance's 80th birthday banquet had not been organized by Jessica at all. For a year leading up to the event, people had taken photos of Clara doing preliminary work. The butler, unable to stand the injustice, had released Clara's design plans. Including initial drafts and extensive research, she had created a total of 120 proposals. In the final plan, she had prepared over a dozen contingency options for every single step. Her dedication was clear. But the day before the banquet, that dedication had become a tool for Ethan to please someone else. As the news spread, Vance Corp had no choice but to suspend Ethan from his duties, appointing someone else to manage the company. Ethan Vance, once the envied heir to a great fortune, had become a laughingstock, ungrateful and easily deceived. He hated himself, and he hated Jessica for deceiving him even more. Just then, his assistant knocked on the door, expertly administered a painkiller, and informed him, "Mr. Vance, Jessica Miller's plastic surgery is complete. She is in the basement now." Chapter 17. Hearing this news, Ethan sobered up considerably. He rose and headed to the basement. Before he even reached the door, he could hear a series of blood-curdling screams. "On my face, why does it look like this? This isn't how I should look. It shouldn't be." Jessica stared at her still recovering, sagging face in agony. Her original face wasn't ugly. She was actually quite attractive. But to swindle money from Ethan, she had gone to extreme lengths, transforming herself into someone completely different. Since Ethan was determined to destroy her, he had chosen a disreputable plastic surgery clinic. As a result, Jessica's face had completely collapsed, making her look decades older. Vain as she was, she couldn't bear her current appearance. She smashed every one of the 101 mirrors in the basement. Finally, she collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. "Regretting it now. When you used my hands to hurt Clara, did you ever think this day would come?" Ethan sneered, looking like a demon crawled out of hell. Hearing his voice, Jessica scrambled towards him, banging her head on the floor repeatedly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance, I was wrong. I shouldn't have been greedy, I shouldn't have hurt Miss Ford. I've paid the price. My face is ruined, my reputation is ruined, I can't deceive anyone anymore. Please let me go, please." Tears and snot streamed down her face, but Ethan just looked down at her with cold, merciless eyes. "Let you go? Then who will let Clara go?" He bent down, lifted Jessica's chin, and smiled a chilling smile. "This is just the beginning. I want you to suffer every bit of pain Clara went through." He stood up and gestured to the bodyguards, who dragged the despairing Jessica away. After repeatedly disinfecting his hands with alcohol, Ethan took out a photograph from his pocket. It was a picture of Clara at her graduation defense. Her face was youthful, still holding a hint of baby fat. This was before her foot was broken, before she was shot in the heart, before the heart surgery, and before he had tormented her into a shadow of her former self. And this was the last photo of her Ethan could find. He kissed the lips in the photo almost pathologically, a look of satisfaction on his face. "Clara, you are truly heartless, not leaving a single thing behind for me. Do you know, when I went home and saw your room completely empty, a piece of my heart was carved out. It's all my fault for loving you too late, for only learning to cherish you after you were gone. I know you're angry, deliberately hiding your tracks, and even telling Mother not to tell me where you are." A possessive curve touched his lips. "But it doesn't matter. Once I make Jessica Miller pay, we can definitely go back to how things were." In the following days, Ethan unleashed a brutal revenge on Jessica. He took back everything he had ever given her, from the yacht down to the amulet. He spent a fortune investigating her past, broadcasting all her misdeeds to the public. He discovered that Jessica was a professional con artist who had dropped out of school. She had operated in multiple countries, cheating many people and amassing a fortune. Until recently, when she tried her old tricks on someone and was outsmarted. The man, who appeared wealthy, was actually a social climber using his wife's money. Jessica's attempt to scam him was discovered by the man's formidable wife, who had her beaten half to death. It was through a partner that she learned about Ethan, leading her to get plastic surgery and adopt a new identity. And her supposedly sick grandmother was also a professional scammer. Coincidentally, following the trail, Ethan discovered that this grandmother was one of the people who had participated in his kidnapping years ago. Chapter 18. With Jessica's scams exposed, her reputation hit rock bottom. The international crime syndicate she worked with was also busted by the police. Ethan used his connections and resources to return the swindled money to the victims. In doing so, Ethan's reputation was restored, and he returned to his position as president of Vance Corp. He launched a massive PR campaign, portraying himself as an innocent victim who had also been deceived. A surprising number of people believed it, but what no one knew was that in private, Ethan had reverted to the emotionless, detached man he once was, only now he was even more ruthless. For example, he captured Walter King, the man who had hurt Clara, and subjected him to the cruelest psychological manipulation and hypnosis until his mind shattered. King eventually went mad, escaped, and was trying to turn himself in to the police when he was hit by a car and killed. All of this was done in front of Jessica. She watched as the once defiant Mr. King was reduced to a babbling lunatic, and her own mental state became increasingly paranoid. However, this was just the beginning. Ethan learned from Mr. King that Jessica had been a co-conspirator in the yacht kidnapping. Her goal was to use King to get rid of Clara. After that, Jessica's life became a living hell. Ethan's bodyguards first tied her up and took her onto a yacht. They made her watch as a series of explosions went off, forcing her to flee for her life. She suffered multiple burns and was only pulled from the sea when she was on the verge of death, resulting in a severe lung infection. Once she had recovered slightly, they took her to a monastery. A year ago, Ethan had kowtowed his way up the steps to pray for an amulet for her. Now, it was Jessica's turn to kneel on the ground, reliving the torment Clara had endured. Kneel once, kowtow once, and say, "I'm sorry." The monastery was a popular place of worship, with countless pilgrims visiting daily. Amidst overwhelming panic and the despair of being watched, Jessica knelt until her knees were raw and her forehead was smeared with blood. Ethan stood at the top of the 1,000 steps, watching her with a detached expression, like the Grim Reaper come to claim a soul. Only when Jessica's figure transformed from a small black dot in the mountain mist to a clear, wretched form did Ethan let out a cold laugh. "Amitabha, sir, where you can forgive, you should. What you seek is but an unattainable obsession. Do not burden yourself with sin for it." An old, admonishing voice came from behind him. Ethan turned to see an elderly monk with white hair and a long white beard looking at Jessica with pity. He frowned. "Abbot, she has committed a great wrong. Should I not punish her? Please do not interfere in this matter. I am seeking justice for the one I love." Seeing he could not be swayed, the old monk sighed. "Is it for the one you love or for your own mistakes? I fear you are trapped, unable to escape, your love unrequited." "That is none of your concern," Ethan said, his brow furrowed. "I will compensate for any lost donations." He walked away, leaving the old monk standing alone, his hands pressed together in prayer. The steps to the Buddha's gate are only effective for the sincere of heart. Without sincerity, obsession cannot be dispelled, leaving only regret. His voice was carried away by the wind. The swirling dust stung Jessica's eyes. She looked up, her empty eyes struggling to focus on the man walking down towards her, until he stood before her. 1,000 steps, and you haven't finished. It seems you feel this punishment is not enough. Chapter 19. Jessica, do you feel the despair Clara felt then? She was so gentle, she never hurt anyone, but because of you, I hurt her. Ethan squatted down to look at her. In my entire life, I have never been deceived. You were the first. You don't deserve to live. This was the first time he had spoken to Jessica face to face since her punishment began. The man's eyes were shaped in a way that was famously known for conveying deep affection. But on his face, they only showed cruelty and heartlessness. Jessica suddenly laughed. Why did Clara Ford ever fall in love with you? A monster like you wouldn't have the capacity to love, even without being kidnapped. Even without me, you would have torn her to pieces. Admit it, Ethan Vance, you don't love anyone. You're just a selfish demon. Ethan's hand shot out, clamping around her neck. Shut up, he roared. Am I wrong? Jessica's smile was mocking. Your father is a good-for-nothing philanderer. What better could you be? Selfishness runs in your blood, haha, kidnapped by your own father's mistress, and your own father protected the perpetrator. Your life is a joke. Veins bulged on Ethan's forehead, his grip tightening. Shut up, shut up, shut up, I told you to shut up, to have his most painful past exposed by the person he despised most. Ethan wanted to strangle her on the spot. But unexpectedly, Jessica's lips twisted into a strange smile. With all her remaining strength, she plunged a sharp branch she had been hiding in her hand into his carotid artery. A wave of suffocation washed over Ethan. He released his grip on her neck, clutching his own wound, gasping for air. Jessica threw her head back and laughed maniacally. Before the bodyguards could reach them, she grabbed Ethan and pulled him down with her. Go to hell, Ethan Vance. Ethan woke up 3 days later. He and Jessica had tumbled down the 1,000 steps. Fortunately, they both survived. Unfortunately, Jessica's spine was injured, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. And Ethan had lost his right eye and broken his right leg. The altercation at the monastery was filmed and posted online, sparking a nationwide debate. Someone dug up his early days at Vance Corp, revealing his ruthless business tactics. As a young, inexperienced man, he had mercilessly crushed his competitors to secure deals and resources. It was only with Clara's help that his methods had softened. But he had broken that restraint himself, even torturing his supposed beloved, Jessica. Who knew what other evil deeds such a man would commit for profit in the future? And so, Ethan's newly restored reputation plummeted overnight. Netizens flooded Vance Corp's official social media accounts, demanding his removal. So when Ethan woke up, he was a broken man in every sense. And Jessica's words had come true again. The first person at Vance to kick him while he was down was his own philandering father. He brought back the son he had with another woman and demanded that Arthur Vance name him as the new heir. This illegitimate son happened to be well-behaved, academically gifted, and had successfully started his own company. The Vance family had many descendants. Arthur Vance, weighing the pros and cons, naturally prioritized the family's interests. Ethan's business acumen was undeniable, but his body and reputation were in ruins. The Vance family would not want such an heir, and just like that, he was completely abandoned. His mother's status plummeted along with his, and their marriage ended in divorce. Chapter 20. News of Ethan Vance's ruin reached Clara Ford 6 months later. She was in a coffee shop discussing a new collaboration with a client. In the past year and a half, with the help of her sister-in-law, Anya, she had quickly built her own team. She named her floral design studio Lunar Bloom, a nod to her past. In memory of Martha Vance, and after discussing it with her family, she decided not to change her name back. The studio's logo was a crescent moon adorned with a cluster of flowers. With her years of experience at Vance Corp, managing a small design studio was second nature. In its first month, she secured 5 projects. She was personally involved in every step, from client consultation and site evaluation to design confirmation and flower selection, ensuring a perfect experience for her clients. These first 5 clients were all old contacts of Anya's who had come to show their support. They were unexpectedly blown away by the results. The settings were incredibly photogenic, every snapshot looking like a high-end photo shoot, yet the prices were reasonable. With their promotion, Clara's waitlist grew to over 100 in just 3 months. But she believed in quality over quantity, so she only took on 5 projects a month. A year later, her studio expanded into a startup company. She hired more designers and increased her capacity. Clara gradually delegated more responsibility and began to collaborate with Anya. Their first project was a series of 12 floral-scented perfumes, inspired by traditional mythology. They blended cultural heritage and stories into the fragrances, offering a wider emotional palette for modern women. Their second venture was a winery, specializing in floral and fruit wines. Third, they launched a multi-themed photo studio. Anya's fashion sense and Clara's ingenious set designs created a novel experience for customers. The two sisters-in-law, already similar in many ways, worked together seamlessly. Their joint projects were instant hits. Even Leo joked that if he ever got tired of working, he could just live off his wife and sister. The two women responded with a joint eye roll. It was only then that the pain of her past finally ceased to affect Clara. She was strong enough and busy enough that she had no time to dwell on the toxic people and events of her past. But at the next recruitment drive, Clara, who was conducting the interviews herself, came face to face with a designer from her former team at Vance Corp. She was a senior designer who had been with Vance Corp for 7 years. Clara was surprised to see her so far from home, having crossed the entire country. Sensing her confusion, the designer explained. That was how Clara learned about what had happened to Ethan and Alina and the subsequent events. After Richard Vance Jr., the illegitimate son, was acknowledged, his ambitions were not fulfilled. Arthur Vance had 4 sons and over a dozen grandchildren. Richard Vance, Ethan's father, was the 3rd son. He had never been a good student, lacked moral character, and had no business sense. After Ethan's birth, he had an affair and spent his time traveling, becoming a stain on the Vance family name. It was only because Ethan was capable, and with Clara's help, that the 3rd branch of the family's status had improved. Richard Vance had long since fallen out of love with Alina and despised his emotionless, monstrous son, Ethan. Influenced by his mistress, he had brought back his talented illegitimate son, hoping to once again be the father of the Vance Corp president and enjoy a comfortable old age. Chapter 21. But the other talented descendants of the family would not stand for Richard Vance's actions. After Ethan's downfall, the infighting within the Vance family intensified. One relative's extreme actions even caused Arthur Vance to have a stroke. Vance Corp was in a precarious position, being eaten away by competing companies. The employees, seeking to save themselves, naturally resigned amidst the chaos. This designer had recognized Clara as the owner of Lunar Bloom and decided to try her luck. She was excellent and Clara hired her. That night, for the first time in a long while, Clara couldn't sleep. At the Vance household, the stern Arthur Vance had been kind to her. She didn't want to see his life's work destroyed by his descendants. She also wanted to see Alina, who had treated her like her own daughter. As far as she knew, Alina's own family had not treated her well. Her parents favored her brother, marrying her off to the disreputable Richard Vance just so her brother could get help from the Vance family. With Ethan's downfall and her forced divorce, Alina must be having a difficult time. When she told her family of her decision, they all agreed. Her mother even said, "If your other mother is willing, you can bring her here." Clara was surprised and touched. That night, much to her father's mock chagrin, she took her mother to her room. She sincerely recounted her years with Alina. Finally, she sighed. "Mom, I'm very fond of Mrs. Vance. She has a similar temperament to yours, and she gave me the maternal love I had been missing for so long. But she is also Ethan's mother, and when it comes to him, she will always side with him. Just like in my 12 years with the Vances. Ethan was cruel to me, and all Mrs. Vance could do was offer comfort after the fact. The pain Ethan caused me is too much. I may not dwell on it anymore, but I can't forget it. So, I probably won't have much more contact with Mrs. Vance." Clara took out the $10 million and the property deed Alina had given her. "This is what Mrs. Vance gave me when I left. She was worried my real parents wouldn't treat me well and wanted to give me a safety net. She gave me this much, I will give her 10 times more. I'm planning to give her $100 million, buy her an estate, hire some staff, and provide for her for the rest of her life." Her mother looked at her gently and pulled her into a hug. "All right, my Clara is the kindest, most grateful child. I support all your decisions." She thought for a moment. "When you go, have your brother and sister-in-law go with you." Clara was about to refuse, but her mother insisted. "Let them go with you. It's too chaotic over there. I'm worried." Clara considered it and realized she was right. The Ford family's reputation didn't extend to the city where the Vances lived. And many people didn't believe she had truly fallen out of love with Ethan when she left. If she went back alone now, she would be seen as trying to help Ethan regain power, which would put her in danger. After all, Ethan was ruthless by nature and had made many enemies over the years to secure his position. For safety's sake, she agreed and even took a team of bodyguards with her. Besides visiting Alina, she and Anya had another mission: to explore the northern market and open a branch there. The three of them took a private jet and arrived in the Vance's city that day. After checking into a hotel, Leo had someone investigate the Vance family's current situation, while Clara and Anya explored the neighborhood, gathering design inspiration. But as they walked, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that a pair of eyes was fixed on her, making her uncomfortable. When she returned to the hotel and saw Leo's grave expression, the feeling of unease intensified. Chapter 22. Clara, I don't think you should stay here any longer. Leo frowned. The Vance family. Their situation is not good. It's now completely in Ethan Vance's control. No one expected that Ethan had another card up his sleeve. He crushed the other heirs so thoroughly they had no chance to fight back. And old Master Vance is dead. Richard Vance died of a heart attack in a compromising position. The dirty laundry of the other Vance family members has also been aired out, more or less. In comparison, Ethan's past actions seem trivial. Clara now understood that Ethan's ruthless efficiency over the years was him holding back. He had made himself a target, drawing the fire of those who opposed him towards Vance Corp. In secret, he was running another company in a completely different industry, quietly building his strength. This company wasn't supposed to be revealed so soon, but the accident and the loss of his heir status, coupled with his father's betrayal, had turned him into a laughingstock. He had always been proud, and this outcome had twisted his psyche, leading him to seek revenge. In just 2 months, the remaining Vance heirs were beaten down by his tactics. A few who refused to give in confronted him directly. But under his expert psychological torment, they met with accidents. One even fell off a cliff, his body never found. Without staining his own hands, Ethan had won a stunning victory. After seizing power and stabilizing the situation, he began searching for Clara again. It was only a matter of time before he found her. Clara finally knew who had been following her all day. It seemed Ethan had already found her, but for some reason, he hadn't approached her. A flicker of fear ignited in Clara's heart. Her pulse quickened, and she felt a wave of nausea. Seeing this, Anya gave her some heart medication. Clara didn't try to tough it out. She took 2 pills and slowly recovered, letting out a long breath. Back with the Ford family, doctors had carefully managed her health. Her leg injury had mostly healed, though she couldn't run or jump strenuously. But the organic damage to her heart was irreversible. She had to avoid strong emotional fluctuations and take medication regularly. The physical pain Ethan had caused her would be with her for life, but she still wasn't ready to turn back. She looked at her brother and sister-in-law seriously. My business with Ethan Vance needs a conclusion, one way or another. If I don't resolve it now, it will become a huge problem later. I'm just going to see Mrs. Vance and then leave. With the entire Ford family behind me, he wouldn't dare do anything to me. Under her father's leadership, the corrupt elements of the Ford family were gone. The remaining members were united and strong. Even here, there were many Ford family members who could protect her. Her brother and sister-in-law couldn't change her mind and had to agree. Their only condition was that she not start a business here and leave immediately after seeing Alina tomorrow. Clara readily agreed. The next day, her brother and sister-in-law took her to a nursing home. After being abandoned by Richard and kicked out by her own family, Alina had ended up here. Ethan, already emotionally distant, had little love for his own mother. At the time, he was dealing with his own crisis and couldn't be bothered. He had just given her a sum of money and told her to make her own arrangements. So Alina had come to this nursing home to live out the rest of her days. When Clara arrived, she was lying in a rocking chair, gazing quietly out the window. She had shed the expensive clothes of a wealthy socialite for a plain, faded patient gown. In just over a year, her hair had turned completely white, and she looked incredibly old. A caregiver told them she was suffering from severe depression. After years of holding on for her son's sake, her body had finally given out. Without proper treatment, she didn't have much time left. Chapter 23. Clara's heart was filled with a mix of emotions. She slowed her steps as she approached. Aunt Lynn, Alina's body flinched, but she didn't turn around. Clara took another step forward, slowly kneeling in front of her, looking up with tears in her eyes. Aunt Lynn, Clara is back. I've come to see you. Only then did Aliner's eyes widen in surprise. Her trembling hands reached out to touch Clara's face, tears of joy streaming down silently. Clara nuzzled her hand, just as she had as a child, her smile warm. Aliner looked at her for a long, long time, as if trying to commit her face to memory. But in the end, she pushed her away. She shouted, her voice trembling, "Why did you come back? Leave, quickly, you're not welcome here." Her tone was harsh, but Clara saw deep concern in her eyes, and fear and worry. She was telling her to run, to get away from this place. But Clara just stood up calmly and looked towards a corner of the room. A tall, thin figure stood there. He had been watching her since the moment she entered the nursing home. Clara gave a polite, meaningless smile. "Long time no see, Ethan Vance." The man stepped out of the shadows. He had a slight limp, but as he walked towards her, his steps were slow and deliberate, the flaw almost imperceptible. He stopped in front of Clara, his lips trembling, his excitement palpable. "Clara, it's been a long time. I finally found you." Clara looked up into his eyes. The intact one was filled with excitement and a raw, clumsy love. The other, a prosthetic, was made of a sapphire that looked like the deep sea. It was beautiful. "Clara, I got revenge for you. I know I was wrong. You came back to see me, which means you're willing to give me another chance, right? I can give you the entire Vance family. I can give you my company, all my assets. Just look at me again, smile at me again, that's all I ask." Ethan was tall, and Clara only came up to his chest. Years ago, she had fantasized about hugging him, her ear pressed against his heart. She would have asked his heart if it loved her. But later, the heart that had loved him was shattered, and the hug never came. Now, Ethan finally loved her, but she no longer needed it. Clara shook her head. "Ethan, admit it, your emotional detachment is a disorder. You're just a fast learner. You know how to perform the actions of love. But in reality, you don't love anyone, not even yourself." She tilted her head. "You just thought that my saving you was different from the normal human interactions you observed, so you found it novel. You say you love me, that the girl who saved you is your one true love. But the moment I lost my memory, you forgot me. Ethan, you are so selfish." Ethan staggered, shaking his head. "No, that's not it. It can't be like that." He reached out for Clara, but she stepped away. Her smile was gentle, but her words were incredibly cruel. "Ethan, you are so selfish. You don't understand emotion, so your attempts at love are just a clumsy imitation. You punished Jessica for me, but was she really the problem? Jessica Miller, some other Jessica, does it really matter who she was?" She looked directly into Ethan's uncomprehending eyes. The emotion in the prosthetic eye was somehow fuller than in the real one. Clara thought, Ethan Vance really is a monster in human skin. Chapter 24. "Let it go, Ethan. You've hurt me enough." She pulled down the collar of her shirt slightly, revealing an ugly, centipede-like scar. She then lifted her pant leg, showing several surgical scars that had formed keloids. "Because of you, I can't wear dresses anymore, not even shorts. And I'm afraid to fall in love again. I'm afraid of being trapped in another suffocating relationship. If it weren't for my family, you would be looking at nothing but a pile of dust right now." Ethan took 2 steps back, his eyes darting around, unable to look at her scars. He couldn't answer her. After a long silence, he collapsed to his knees. "I'm sorry, Clara. It's all my fault. It seems no matter what I do, you won't love me anymore." Clara looked at him, the mockery in her eyes deepening. She was the sole heiress of the Ford family and a successful entrepreneur. Many men had pursued her over the past year, men more handsome, richer, and gentler than him. She didn't want to get married, but she never said she wouldn't date. For instance, among the bodyguards standing outside the door right now, there was one with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. He was an excellent suitor, attentive to her every need. He understood her boundaries and never crossed them. And he was realistic, never asking for more than she was willing to give. He had even offered her a contract one day, saying he would do anything for her. If she wanted him, he was hers. If he ever overstepped, she could get rid of him at any time. Clara had already decided to start a relationship with this bodyguard when she returned. She wanted to experience what it felt like to be truly loved and cared for. After all, the best way to forget a bad relationship is to start a new one. And she had already waited long enough. But Ethan was an arrogant man. He would never believe that Clara could fall in love with someone else. So he believed her lie, and his self-loathing grew. Clara didn't want to play games with him anymore. Besides, Eleanor was sitting right there. Clara didn't want her to see her son like this, it would break her heart. So she said, "Ethan, stop harassing me. I came here with over 100 bodyguards. I only came back to see Aunt Lynn. Now that I have, I'm leaving. Instead of bothering me, you should treat her better. She has suffered too much for you over the years. Don't make her worry anymore." As Ethan continued to plead, a team of bodyguards entered, forming a barrier between him and Clara. The man leading them was the very bodyguard who had been pursuing her. Leo and Anya also stepped forward, shielding Clara. Leo spoke coldly. "Ethan Vance, out of respect for how Aunt Lynn treated my sister over the years, I'm giving you one last chance. Stay away from my sister. If you continue to harass her, I will not let you off the hook." Ethan knew of Leo Ford's reputation. He couldn't win a direct confrontation and had no choice but to retreat. Once the room was cleared, Clara turned back to Eleanor. Eleanor was weeping uncontrollably. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I failed you by raising such a son." Clara shook her head. "Don't say that. Without your protection, I wouldn't have survived all those years at the Vance household." She handed over the property deed and the bank card. "This is the money you gave me then. Now I'm giving it back to you." Chapter 25. You protected me for 12 years. I will provide for you for the rest of your life. After giving her these things, she left, leaving a sobbing Eleanor behind. It felt as if the last shackle had been broken, and she was finally, completely free to be herself. The day before she left, she took Anya to a street food stall to experience the city where she had lived for 12 years. She told Anya stories of those years, the joys and sorrows that made up the song of her life. When they were full, Clara placed the 2 largest bills she had into a beggar's bowl on the sidewalk. She also left a bag of clean, warm food. Anya glanced at the beggar and whispered to Clara, "Clara, that person looks like—" "I know it's her." "I know," Clara smiled gently. "In the end, she was just a tool. She's been punished enough." After they left, laughing, the beggar looked up. From her haggard, ugly face, tears of regret flowed. It was Jessica Miller. After her accident with Ethan, no one would pay for her treatment, and she was left with severe, lasting injuries. Ethan, in his revenge, had her legs broken and gave her to a creditor who sold her to a beggar's den. She was only allowed to keep a small portion of her daily earnings to buy stale bread. The rest was taken from her. But even so, she felt a strange sense of peace. At least no one could do those terrible things to her anymore. She never imagined that in this state, the one person who would show her genuine kindness would be the person she had hurt the most, Clara Ford. Jessica opened the bag of food and devoured its contents. Looking at the crisp new bills, she began to wail. She was wrong, so wrong. If she had known then what she knew now, if she hadn't been so greedy, her fate would not have been so tragic. But regret was useless now. Her spine was damaged, and her legs had been broken by the creditor. This was the rest of her life. Meanwhile, back at Vance Corp, Ethan curled up in a corner, unable to cry. Because of his father's betrayal and abuse, he had been a monster who couldn't cry since childhood. His mother's concern irritated him, his family's mockery shamed him. Only one person was different, Clara. She could cry, laugh, care for him, and understand him. But somehow, Ethan had felt that she was mocking him. He had to admit, even to himself, that he had long forgotten what his first love looked like. He had just used her as an emotional crutch to prove to others that he wasn't a completely heartless monster. But over time, he had even managed to deceive himself. Ethan raised a glass of wine to his lips but quickly spat it out. It mixed with blood, staining the documents on his desk. Under his leadership, Vance Corp had become even stronger than before. No one dared to defy his decisions. And under his iron fist, those who had once called him cold and ruthless no longer dared to speak against him. Ethan was trying his best to become worthy of Clara, but it was no use. He was improving too slowly. He had already exhausted all of Clara's love. He suddenly felt that after struggling for over a decade, he had everything. Wealth, power, honor, followers. He had achieved more by his early 30s than most people do in a lifetime. Chapter 26, but what was the use? He still had nothing. He remembered what his assistant of 10 years had said on his last day. "Mr. Vance, you were incredibly lucky to have met Miss Ford twice. She is a good person. She is good to everyone. And it is because of her goodness that you were able to transform from an unqualified heir into the president of Vance Corp. But you were also incredibly unlucky. Because of your own confusion and stubbornness, you have deeply hurt everyone who has ever truly cared for you. I'm sorry, Mr. Vance. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to become as cold and heartless as you. I want to live a normal life. See? In the end, he was deserted by everyone, but it didn't matter. He forced himself to be calm. He still had Vance Corp. He had employees, partners, and business. He was not alone. Ethan opened another bottle of wine and walked through the building, looking at the empire he had built. Suddenly, he heard a rustling sound. He approached cautiously and shouted, "Who's there?" A sharp pain pierced his chest. A knife had been plunged into his heart. He looked up in shock. The person who had made the noise was his illegitimate brother, and the one who had stabbed him from behind was a business partner he had crushed multiple times. They were clearly here to steal files from the archives. The illegitimate son panicked and urged his accomplice to flee. Ethan collapsed to the floor, blood gushing from his chest like a fountain. He pressed a button on the remote in his pocket. The building's doors locked shut, and the entire power system failed. With his last ounce of strength, he lit a cigarette and threw it, along with the bottle of wine, onto the scattered papers in the archives. Soon, the building was engulfed in flames. Ethan closed his eyes with a smile. "Clara, I've experienced the pain you went through. If there's a next life, I promise I will learn to love you first." But at that very moment, Clara was on vacation abroad with her young bodyguard. On a beautiful island, there was the sea, sand, sun, cold drinks, fruit, and an 8-pack of abs. The bodyguard was on one knee, carefully applying sunscreen for her. Clara suddenly sneezed, and he looked up in concern. "Is the sea breeze too cold? Should I get you a blanket?" Clara gave him a helpless look, letting him figure it out for himself. "It's 95 degrees out here. I'm about to melt. If you put a blanket on me, I'll dissolve." The bodyguard rubbed his nose sheepishly, a shy smile on his face. The days in the sun had tanned his skin a little darker, making him look even more handsome. It also added a touch of maturity and security to his still youthful face. He noticed the undisguised admiration in Clara's eyes, and a blush crept up his wheat-colored cheeks. He said, a little embarrassed, "Ma'am, you're making me shy when you look at me like that, and please, stop teasing me." He took Clara's hand and rubbed it against his cheek. "I was just worried, that's all," but Clara was looking at his face and thinking about something else. He was only 20. She was already 27. Younger men were really the best. They were sweet, they were caring, they had stamina, and they were full of life. Chapter 27. Thank goodness she hadn't stubbornly held onto her feelings for a certain someone, and she hadn't let that person stop her from dating again. Otherwise, she would have missed out on this wonderful experience. Clara held out her hand, and the bodyguard placed a coconut in it. She sipped the coconut water contentedly, feeling wonderful. But just then, she received a call. It was from Leo. Clara answered, puzzled. Her brother's hesitant voice came through the line. "Clara, Ethan Vance is dead. According to the police, it seems he was stabbed and then started a fire. A total of 3 people died. The Vance Corp building was completely destroyed, along with all the documents inside. Which means Vance Corp is bankrupt." He paused. Since his only remaining direct relative is Eleanor Vance, the police notified her to identify the body. But there wasn't really a body. It was burned beyond recognition. Even the ashes were scattered when the building collapsed. Clara gripped her phone, an indescribable feeling of heaviness in her chest. Life was so fragile. She never thought Ethan would leave this world in such a way. And hearing her brother describe the state of his death, it was truly fate. In the end, Ethan had experienced everything she had gone through. "Clara, do you want to come back and see?" Leo's voice was hesitant, as if he was afraid she would be plunged back into her past pain. "No. With death, all debts are cleared. From now on, I don't know any Ethan Vance." Clara smiled, a sense of release in her voice. She thought for a moment. "But how is Aunt Lynn? I remember before I left, even though we found the best doctors for her health was still not good." Leo hummed in agreement. "Her health is still not great, but she was surprisingly calm when she went to identify the body. She said with a sigh of relief, 'It's finally over.'" Leo didn't quite understand what she meant, and his voice was filled with confusion. But Clara understood. To Eleanor, Ethan and Clara were both precious to her. She couldn't choose between them and could only lean towards the side of right, but the conflict had tormented her to the brink of death. Now that Ethan was gone, she was sad, but there was also a sense of finality and relief. Clara thought that Aliner's illness would probably get better soon. So she said, "Brother, Anya's flower farm happens to need a gardener. Let's invite Aunt Lynn over." "Of course, whatever you say." They chatted for a few more minutes before hanging up. Clara then looked down at the man squatting on the ground. He looked like a sad puppy, his eyes filled with jealousy. "If you want to go back and see, I'll go with you." Clara chuckled and leaned down to kiss him. "Don't be silly. We still have to travel the world. I don't have time." Besides, she was here to research a new business venture. She was busy, so busy she was on her feet all day, and her life was full. The people and events of the past could be left to the dust. End of story.